What's with that look? You sure are rude for a daughter-in-law, Karen said as she looked at me with disdain.
I've decided to live with my mom. If you don't like it, we'll get a divorce.
My husband, Marcus, dropped a bombshell. What on earth are these people saying? They're forcing me to come back home to do housework while I was back to my parents' place to have this baby. And then he added,
If we leave the baby to my mom, you can focus on the housework.
My once gentle husband seemed like a different person, leaving me in utter despair, beyond sadness or anger. My brother raised an eyebrow and asked,
Doesn't that sound suspicious?
He started to share a plan to uncover the truth.
Do exactly as I say tomorrow, okay?
My name is Hannah, 32. I'm about to have my first baby. My due date is approaching, so I'm heading back to my parents' house tomorrow.
No, you shouldn't be lifting heavy things with a baby. Let me handle it,
Marcus said, packing my things for me. He was so kind and dependable. Don't start living like a slob just because I'm not there, I teased, knowing our new house was spotless thanks to my daily cleaning.
Of course, I'll keep it clean and wait for you, so come out soon, baby,
he said, rubbing my belly. It was a happy moment until it was ruined by a phone call. Seeing the name on the screen made my mood plummet. Hello, Hannah, came my mother-in-law Karen's shrill voice. You're having a baby at your parents' place. I told you that's disgraceful. I was tired of her daily calls, filled with fake concern and constant jabs. You're just lying around at home. Must be nice. Your belly is too tight. You must be overeating. Planning to gain even more weight? You're already big enough. She spat, followed by bragging about her own child-rearing days and lectures. I raised a fine boy with only breast milk and cloth diapers. Never felt it was hard. You're too soft, Hannah. She would even compare me to Marcus's ex-girlfriend and complain. She was cheerful and obedient. Why are you so defiant? I couldn't believe it. I asked Marcus to stop her, but the calls didn't stop. He's too kind to confront her, but I wouldn't be able to take this after the baby is born. Hannah, are you listening? Karen snapped. Yes, I am, I replied. Cancel your stay at your parents'. How could you leave my son alone? She demanded. Why is she worrying about her grown son? We're in the same city and I can come back quickly if needed, I said. It's not about the distance, she yelled. But I've already told my parents I was coming back, I insisted. Your parents? Whose child are you having? She spat out, showing just how outdated she was. Mine, obviously, but saying that would drive her mad. Marcus took the phone from me and said,
Mom, I told you. I have an important business trip starting tomorrow until her due date. It's safer if Hannah stays with her parents.
You never told me that, she retorted.
We decided this together, he replied.
Why are you talking to me like that, Marcus? She whined.
Could you take over instead then, Mom?
He asked. No way, she snapped. I didn't want her around either. She's terrible at housework and lives in a filthy house with 2 dogs and 2 cats. They're cute but not hygienic, and my midwife said it's better not to be around because of my suspected cat allergy. I can't look after Hannah. I have my dogs and cats to take care of.
Then it's settled.
Why would you say that? I had you and went straight back to work. Hannah is too spoiled.
Mom, are you saying it's okay if something happens to the baby?
I never said that. She snapped, and he tried to calm her down. She means no harm, but as a veteran parent, she's overexcited about her first grandchild. Still, I couldn't handle her while heavily pregnant. Marcus stepping in was a huge relief.
Don't worry about it,
he said, so I went to my parents as planned. Unless something happens, I'll stay until the baby's 1-month checkup. My parents live with my brother's family in a large house, and my sister-in-law just had a baby, so they're experienced and can help. I'd miss Marcus, but it's reassuring to have my mom and sister-in-law around. I spent a peaceful time at my parents' house. Labor started the day before my due date, and I gave birth safely. Marcus was still on his trip, which was a shame, but I sent him pictures. Timing is beyond our control. I dragged my aching postpartum body trying to care for my adorable baby. Even though I'd studied up, everything was new and difficult. The baby cried day and night, and just holding him made my shoulders tense. Feeding and changing diapers took up the whole day. My birth injuries hurt, and I couldn't sleep well, leaving me exhausted. But I loved my baby more than anything. I never got tired of looking at him, seeing the strength in his tiny cries. It was a relief that the hospital restricted visitors due to infection control. Otherwise, Karen would have drained my energy. The day to leave the hospital came quickly. Marcus was supposed to pick me up and take us to my parents, but an urgent matter came up, so my brother came instead. Work is important, so I understood. I couldn't wait for him to meet our baby. He had been so excited. But days passed, then a week, and still no visit from him. This is strange. Our baby was born. He should have rushed over. My family was worried too. I knew it was a busy time for him, but surely he could spare a moment to see us. I felt uneasy. Messages asking him to call went unread, adding to my anxiety. I tried calling at a time when he should be free, but he didn't answer. What's going on? He finally called back around midnight.
Oh, you're awake? I thought you'd be asleep.
But you called me. That didn't matter. I was just relieved to hear his voice. I was just feeding the baby. You must be really busy.
Yeah, a bit.
He replied casually, as if my worries meant nothing. Come see the baby soon. We need to submit the birth certificate. What's the matter?
You can do that without me, right?
What? I yelled, waking the baby.
Sorry, I'm really busy.
I get that, but the baby started crying again, needing a diaper change.
The name we picked is fine. No changes.
What?
I saw the pictures, so just handle the paperwork. Okay, gotta go.
Hey, wait!
I've got an early start tomorrow. Bye.
And he hung up. I was stunned and my mind went blank for a moment. Then I started to feel sad. No matter how busy he is, handling things so coldly is just awful. It was too much for my fragile postpartum state. I sighed, feeling it was hopeless. Sure, I had the baby, but Marcus's life hadn't changed at all. Expecting him to switch into dad mode suddenly was unrealistic. I hoped he'd feel differently when he saw our child. I thought about going home early, but my mom and sister-in-law convinced me not to. Still, something didn't feel right. His cold attitude was troubling. Karen, who used to call incessantly, hadn't contacted me at all. I'd sent several messages with no replies. Not that I wanted to hear from her, but still, what was going on? Taking care of a newborn left me no time to dwell on it. 2 weeks flew by. My brother submitted the birth certificate. My parents helped during the day so I could get some rest, and my strength was returning. Then Marcus called. Hello, honey.
We need to talk.
His tone was ominous. What's wrong?
Come home now.
What? Now? What's going on? The baby just fell asleep and I'm in my pajamas. What happened? Is everything alright?
Just come home now.
He sounded frantic. Something serious must have happened. I hastily handed the baby to my mom and drove back in my pajamas. What could have happened? I told myself to drive safely, but the red lights felt endless and I was getting annoyed. 10 minutes later, I arrived home. I clutched my phone just in case. I walked in to find Marcus and Karen relaxing with coffee. I had expected the worst, but I was still taken aback. As I stood there not understanding what was going on, I noticed something off about the house. What is this? All my small vases, cushions, stuffed animals, and wall clocks were gone. Oh, I didn't like them, so I threw them out, Karen said nonchalantly. Those were all precious to me, too. And I took the room upstairs, she added. This didn't make any sense. I looked at Marcus for help, but he was ice cold. What's going on? Why did you tell me to come home? I demanded. While he stayed silent, Karen spoke. Enough with this nonsense. Excuse me? When are you coming back? You're the wife. You need to take care of us. Come home and make our meals, she said. I was speechless. I was supposed to be with the baby until his 1-month checkup. What's with that look? She glared. I mustered up the courage and said to my husband. Marcus, explain this, I pleaded.
I've decided to live with my mom,
he said. Wait, what?
If you don't like it, we'll get a divorce.
Wait, how did this happen? What did I do? Why is this happening? I begged, tears welling up. Marcus and Karen exchanged smirks.
Well, are you staying or going?
At that moment, her 2 dogs and 2 cats bounded down the stairs, making me sneeze. Of course they're living here with me. They're part of the family. I told you I might be allergic to cats. Uh-huh, sure. It's not like you've been diagnosed. It's all in your head. Karen dismissed. I covered my face with a handkerchief as my eyes and nose itched. Upon closer inspection, I saw scratches on the wallpaper and pillars. It looked like the pets had used them as scratching posts. This was supposed to be our pristine new house. How could Marcus suggest this when he knew about my allergy? Why now? Why is she moving in now?
Mom will handle the baby so you can focus on the house.
Don't make decisions without me. Why did you throw away my things? They were tacky, she said. Excuse me? I definitely didn't want to hear that from a mother-in-law who goes shopping in her son's hand-me-down tracksuit. I tried to argue, but Marcus cut me off.
Just make dinner.
What? Who is this jerk? I felt despair beyond anger. Does he not even care where our baby is right now? The thought of our baby brought me clarity. Enough. I didn't need this husband or this father. This is a waste of time. Divorce it is. Tears welled up, not from sadness, but from my cat allergy. I fled back to my parents' house. Seeing my sleeping baby, I finally cried. My brother listened to my story. I told him how they're forcing me to live with them in the house that no longer looked anything like it did before. Tears kept flowing even without the cats.
Isn't this suspicious, though?
My brother said.
Why are they doing this to you now? Maybe something happened.
He mumbled to himself.
You're just going to accept this?
I don't know what to do.
Are you okay with it?
Of course not. It's infuriating and makes no sense.
Listen, tomorrow I want you to do as I say, okay?
The next day I returned to the house in an apron and mask. The place was a mess, covered in pet hair, laundry, and trash. I quietly cleaned each room. Karen watched with satisfaction. I finally figured out your role, huh? Now bring the baby, she ordered. I will after I finish cleaning, I said. When will that be? By tomorrow. Hurry up, lazy. I'm sorry. I'll make sure it's spotless for you and the pets. You'd better. She could gloat all she wanted for now. I smirked. See you tomorrow. Don't be late. She sat there smug and oblivious. She wouldn't be like that for long. Everything was going as planned. I went back to my parents and held my baby. Karen had insisted I bring him. She had another thing coming. I wouldn't let her near my child. My brother showed me a video. It was from a camera I had set up during my cleaning. Karen and Marcus were plotting. Once the house is clean, we'll kick her out. Just a little pressure and she'll break.
Hurry up, my girlfriend is waiting,
he said. I told you, Marcus, your ex is better for you.
You were right. I should have listened.
Hannah's strong-willed, has no love, but has a cat allergy. At least she gave us a grandson, she said.
I don't want the baby when I'm with my girlfriend.
That's fine. I'll raise the baby myself. What audacity. I was furious.
These cameras are impressive,
my brother marveled. I didn't care. My rage was justified. So that was their plan. Take over the house and the baby, dump me, and reunite with his ex. Leaving my baby with my mom, my brother and I stormed out. You won't get away with this, Marcus and Karen. I will not forgive you two for what you've done. I walked back in, shocking both of them. Are you here to continue cleaning the house? Yes, I am, I answered. I'm cleaning up the big trash today. My brother's helping. Fine, but don't make too much noise, Karen said. Sure. Now into the trash, both of you. What?
Excuse me?
Since they didn't understand, I decided to explain. You're the ones getting kicked out, I said. Their faces turned pale. What are you talking about? This sham of a move-in is over. I won't let you replace me with your ex.
What?
Divorce is fine by me. You'll never get the baby. How do you know that? My brother answered.
We saw everything on camera. We have recordings.
A camera?
You can't do that.
When did you install a camera? Today when I was cleaning. I replied nonchalantly. This is an invasion of privacy.
You can't do that without permission. It's illegal.
I stayed calm while they raged. I set them up for you, Karen, I said. For me? Yes, so you can watch your pets when you're out. While checking the camera, I accidentally overheard your conversation.
What?
Marcus went pale. So, Marcus, while I was risking my life giving birth, what were you doing? He was speechless. Karen, did you know? You liked his ex, didn't you? Is this your doing? No, I'm innocent. When I came to cook for Marcus after his trip, his ex was already there.
You suggested she move in, though,
he said. I was covering for your affair. It seemed convenient. They scrambled to explain. Why did you bring her into our house? Was the trip a lie?
No, I met her by chance and had a drink. One thing led to another and it just happened.
What do you mean it just happened?
Well...
I looked at him with utter disgust.
It's not like I had planned it. She said I was neglected.
What? I was furious. Neglected? I'm neglecting him?
She's right, you know. You used your pregnancy as an excuse to ignore me. I felt abandoned.
What are you talking about? You agreed to everything.
No, I didn't. I was pretending. Why didn't you care for me? I was always kind to you and yet never got acknowledged for it.
He whined like a child. What's wrong with him? Is this his true nature? Comparing himself to our unborn child? Unbelievable.
My ex said she'd comfort me if I got tired of being a dad.
So he went straight to her while I was gone? He hadn't even started being a dad yet. I took out my phone and made a call. It's a call to the woman who needed to be present. I had already contacted her. My brother had found her on social media, explained the situation, and she agreed to talk. Hi, sorry to bother you again. Could you tell my husband what you told me earlier? He still doesn't seem to get it. I put the phone on speaker. Annoyed, she began. I did nothing wrong. I was tricked into coming over and listened to his complaints. Then his mom showed up, and it got weird. So I left quickly. I hate her and don't want any contact. I'm married with kids. Marcus and Karen were stunned. You hate me?
Maybe I didn't remember things clearly because I was drunk.
I don't remember her being married. So who's lying? I asked coldly. Marcus laughed nervously.
It's her. She fled when things got awkward. I'm the victim here. Forgive me, Anna. Of course, I forgive you too.
I had nothing to be forgiven for. He looked guilty. His lies were obvious. He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. Don't touch me with your filthy hands.
You're right to be mad now, but you'll forgive me someday. I was lonely, manipulated by my ex and mom. Let's start over.
Start over? Are you drunk? I see your true colors now. It's good you didn't hold my baby.
What? I can't hold my child?
Neither can Karen. That's ridiculous. Why wouldn't you let me hold him?
Wait, let's fix this. Seeing our baby will change me.
I couldn't believe it. I saw him say he didn't want the baby on camera. You're the one who wanted a divorce. You're too immature to be a parent.
You're taking the father away from the baby?
Don't act like a dad now. Better no father than one like you. Start over with your mom in your next life. Hope she praises you enough, I said coldly. Marcus slumped. Karen snapped. You're not scaring me. I'll sue for invasion of privacy and keeping the baby from me. How could she fabricate charges? My brother stepped in.
You'll lose. Don't waste your money.
What do you know? If you just give up, you lose. If you sue, you win. She looked so confident, but she didn't know my brother's profession, did she? My brother quietly handed her his business card. What? You work at a law firm?
Yes, as a lawyer, I can tell you this case wouldn't hold up in court. You'd just waste your money.
To the shocked pair, I said, You're right, giving up would be a loss. I'll sue for alimony and child support. What? They panicked. The cats woke up and I left before sneezing. Wait!
Tell me you're joking.
They yelled, but I ignored them. I returned to my baby. Of course, Marcus and I divorced. I demanded a lump sum for alimony and child support. He sulked.
Divorce? It's unfair to me and the kid.
Unfair? Yes, it's unfair to me and the baby because he betrayed us. He'll never be a father. Karen was worse. I'm old with 4 pets. You'd let us suffer? My grandson deserves better than you. She blamed me but was completely wrong. Don't shift pet care onto me. I'm glad my mother-in-law, who tried to force my child to take care of her in her old age, is out of the picture. I want him to be happy. They wanted to stay in the house we bought last year. It was bold of them to want to stay in a house that was co-owned. It was in both our names, but I didn't want to stay where they ruined it. So we sold it for the lump sum. The house went to someone else, and I got the money. A fresh start. I'm happy for you for getting what you wanted, Marcus. My brother guided us through the process. I owed him a lot. Sorry for dragging you into this. I apologized to him, to which he replied,
I'll always help you, Hannah.
He's so sweet.
Next time, introduce me to any new guy.
He's also protective. I'll focus on raising my child. No time for men. But at the hospital for an allergy test, I met an old classmate. We exchanged contacts. I thought we'd never talk because I was busy, but he was busier than me as a nurse. We emailed occasionally. The allergy test results came back, and I did have a cat allergy, sadly. I love cats. Years passed before we could have dinner. We dated, and after a few years, got married. He was the right father for my child. My brother and I agreed. I want to be happy.
My husband only gives me $50 a month for food and living expenses. A few months later, I collapsed from hunger, and when I woke up,
I met my husband Simon during college and we got married. Married life with my husband was never easy. My monthly food and living expenses amounted to only $50. A few months later, I collapsed from extreme hunger. Feeling intense anger over a certain event that occurred afterward, I decided to divorce my husband. Eventually, the happiness I achieved became a form of revenge against my husband. My husband only provided $50 for food and living expenses. When my hunger reached its limit, I collapsed and woke up to... I have a chronic illness. I'm withholding the name because I'm afraid of being identified, and I married an office worker. I met my husband during college, and after dating for 2 years, we married. My husband is earnest and kind, treating me normally without prejudice despite my chronic illness. I genuinely believed that I could be happy with him. I was looking forward to a happy married life. However, reality was harsh. A year and a half after marriage, my husband controlled our spending. He would give me about $50 a month for food and living expenses. My husband works in real estate, earning an annual income of $40,000. I work part-time, but due to my chronic illness, I cannot work many shifts, earning just under $1,800 per month. Both of my parents have debts, so I send all my part-time wages to them. I manage the shortfall in food expenses using the small savings from my college days, but even that ran out within a year. $50 a month. Seriously? If that's true, that husband is really in trouble. Amanda, did you never discuss food and living expenses with your husband? $50 a month is surely too tight. Couldn't you ask for a bit more? Despite discussing it multiple times, my husband said,
Back in my student days, I lived on a tight budget, but I managed just fine with $50. Aren't you just bad at managing your money?
He never listens to what I say. Even if I try to talk more, he always gets upset and locks himself in his room. For the past 6 months, I've had to rely on consumer loans to make ends meet. My husband saves almost all of his earnings. He says it's for emergencies and for us to travel together in our old age. The rest he spends on drinking with colleagues.
You might not understand being a part-timer, but full-time employees have a lot of expenses,
he said. Every morning and evening I cook, but I try to minimize my own portions. For lunch, I often just have juice to avoid wasting anything. At first, it was tough being hungry, but I've surprisingly gotten used to this lifestyle. My husband always complains.
We always have similar meals. I want something more elaborate.
Every time he says that, I bring up our food expenses, but it just makes him unhappy again.
You're lucky to have gotten married considering you can't have children due to your illness, aren't you? What's there to be so dissatisfied about? Since we'll be living together forever, I want to walk with a stylish model-like wife I'm not ashamed to be seen with,"
he said. "I can't afford to go to the beauty salon, so I always cut my own hair. I recycle clothes from when I was single. I'm far from being a model, but this is the best appearance I can manage. I'm lucky I got married despite being ill and unable to have children, right? He's such a bad husband. Why not just divorce him? I need support from my husband, especially considering my illness. If it's so hard, why not leave home? Do you have any family or relatives? Even if I leave home and go to my parents' house, things won't change much from what they are now. When I was in college, my father's workplace went bankrupt. To support my debt-ridden parents, I had to drop out of university. From there, I worked part-time for my family, but I got sick and ended up with this illness. I have no reliable relatives to rely on. My friends around me say, "It's great that you have a good husband with a stable income. I'm having a hard time because my in-laws and friends are so loud about wanting a second child soon. Amanda, you're lucky, right? You don't have to worry about children." I feel awkward and it's hard to discuss because of what they say. Why not just get a divorce? I'd like to if I could, but right now I don't even have money to live alone. I'm forced into a difficult life. With no one to rely on, I managed to endure while working part-time, but one day, tragedy struck. I'm writing this from the hospital on my smartphone. I was doing the usual inventory work at my part-time job. When I was carrying a box of goods, I suddenly felt my consciousness slipping away. When I opened my eyes next, I was in the hospital with an IV tube in my arm. I was surprised and looked to the side to see my stern-faced husband sitting there. I wanted to ask what had happened, but as I tried to speak, my husband sighed heavily.
"I was at work, suddenly called to the hospital, and then to find out you collapsed. Didn't we promise you'd manage your health on your own? I ran in, but you were asleep, so there was no point in me rushing here, was there? Oh, what a waste of time."
Saying that, he went somewhere. I was taken aback by this turn of events. Soon, a nurse came and explained the situation. I lost consciousness while doing inventory, collapsing right there on the spot. My colleagues noticed and called an ambulance for me. According to the doctor, my low blood sugar and malnutrition caused the loss of consciousness. Additionally, my condition had progressed to the point where I needed to be hospitalized for a while. I didn't have any clothes to change into for my hospitalization, so instead of my husband, I had my mother come over. As soon as my mother saw my face, she...
"Oh, you look fine. Thank goodness it doesn't look like anything serious."
She laughed, but I felt I had reached my limit. Feeling gloomy when thinking about my husband, I wanted some time to rest. After being discharged, I asked if I could stay at my parents' house for a short while. However, my mother replied,
"What are you talking about? What about your job? You need to get better soon and start working. We're struggling too, you know. Go back to your husband."
She said that to me. Although my husband contacts me, he has never come to visit me. His messages included,
"I paid for your hospitalization expenses this time, but once you're discharged, you need to work and pay me back. So get well soon for that too. Of course, no interest." See, your savings came in handy, right? You should also rethink your finances. Isn't this a good opportunity?
As days passed, I realized my feelings of affection towards my husband were diminishing. I'm not sure if I can continue living as I have after being discharged.
For your chronic condition, you really need to lead a healthier lifestyle.
That's what the doctor told me, and I politely replied, but if I could manage such a life, I'd like to give it a try. When I woke up, my husband bluntly said,
"It was a waste of time."
With no one else to rely on, I wonder if I have no choice but to continue living with this husband in the future. I will be discharged soon. Yesterday, an unusual person came to visit. It was my aunt. She lives far away and had a strained relationship with my mother, who is her younger sister. The last time we met was at my wedding, and even then, we exchanged only a few words. My mother consulted with my aunt, saying,
"My daughter is hospitalized and can't get enough money for her expenses. Sis, I'm sorry, but can you help me a little?"
It seems she found out about it when she was consulted. Despite her advanced age, she hurried over here, surprised and concerned about my situation.
"What on earth happened? You were stunning at your wedding, and now you've lost so much weight and look so pale. How's your husband doing now?"
I didn't know my aunt very well, and it was the first time we were alone together, so I was unsure what to say and felt puzzled. But after a long hospital stay, I was starved for conversation. I explained what had happened. Before I knew it, I couldn't stop talking, venting even about my husband. After silently listening to my story, my aunt finally began to speak.
I thought he understood about illnesses and seemed like a kind person, so I assumed you were living happily. I had no idea things had turned out like this. Even your mother said she was relieved when you got married and left. Having a daughter with an illness makes her a precious catch for marriage. What a thing to say. Amanda, your health is in danger if things continue like this. If you don't want to go home, how about coming to your aunt's house for a while after you're discharged?
I was surprised by her unexpected suggestion, but since we hadn't talked much before, I didn't think I could ask such a thing, and refused.
My sons are independent now, and there are empty rooms. I can support you, Amanda. So take your time to think about your future. I'll take care of my sister too, so don't worry,
she said. I was puzzled by my aunt's overly kind proposal for a while. My words didn't come out, and my aunt said to me,
"But you have really worked hard to get this far,"
she murmured. As soon as I heard that, something inside me snapped, and then a rush of happiness and all the hardships I had experienced overwhelmed me, and I burst into tears. Seeing me cry so much, my aunt became flustered this time, and a nearby nurse rushed over, thinking something was wrong. Oh my, tears streaming down my face. Aunt, you're amazing. It's true, good things happen to those who work hard, huh? After that, I decided to stay at my aunt's house for a while, which I told my husband about. So, I'll take some time to relax there. When I informed him of this,
"You've been hospitalized for so long, can't you start working again now? Without you, the house is a mess, and I'm in trouble if you don't come back,"
he said. I hesitated for a moment, but when my aunt suggested,
"Why not live together?"
I remembered her serious gaze at that moment and said, "I'm sorry, I need a little more time." Then I quietly hung up the phone. And then I was safely discharged from the hospital and started preparing to go to my aunt's house. The other day, I returned home after a long time. The house was overflowing with empty cans, plastic bottles, and convenience store bags. Inside were sushi containers and pizza boxes, and thinking about how he had indulged in such luxuries all by himself during my vulnerable hospital stay, I felt intense anger. I had felt ashamed about my chronic illness in front of my husband, but that feeling had already faded away. When I went back to work at my part-time job, I apologized sincerely for causing trouble and for considering quitting. My workplace didn't scold me at all. Instead, they praised me for persevering through everything. Upon hearing those words, I wondered if I could have relied more on those around me. That's how I felt. My aunt and uncle warmly welcomed me. They had cleaned and prepared the room I was going to use with a new set of pink sheets on the bed. It made me want to cry again. Just as I was getting ready for my new life, my husband contacted me.
"It's been over a week already. When are you coming back? What about your job?"
When I told him I quit my part-time job.
"What are you thinking? You need to start working again immediately and pay me back for the hospital bills,"
he said, getting angry. I had been in frequent contact with my husband, but he only talked about things like,
"Come home soon and do the housework," or "What about your job after taking so much time off?"
without showing any concern for me. When I discussed this with my aunt,
"Amanda, just focus on improving your health for now. As for your husband, Amanda, it's your decision, but don't rush into anything, okay? I really enjoy living with you. My husband seems happy too, like he's gained a daughter again. He was saying something like that,"
she said, laughing with my uncle. I was genuinely happy. I realized how much I had been manipulated by my husband and that I should have valued my own feelings more. So I decided to divorce my husband. Starting a new life at my aunt's house, I began to feel more relaxed. Re-evaluating myself, I finally decided to divorce my husband. I expected a fight over the divorce, so at my aunt's recommendation, I decided to hire a lawyer. My husband got off easily. After that, my husband, who received the divorce petition, sent angry emails and phone calls every day. However, by then, he was in no state to have a proper discussion, so I told the lawyer to handle everything and let it all go. One day, my husband suddenly visited my aunt's house. While shopping, I received a call from my aunt.
Your husband is at the house now. He wants to talk to you in person,
she said in a flustered tone. I honestly didn't want to see my husband's face, but I felt an urge to finally express all the pent-up emotions I had endured. I decided to meet my husband directly and talk to him. When I returned to my aunt's house, my husband was sitting quietly on the living room sofa. Seeing my husband after a long time, he looked aged and a bit overweight. As soon as our eyes met, he started shouting angrily.
What the hell is this about divorce without even discussing it properly?
Haven't you heard anything from the lawyer? I collapsed because I was struggling with living expenses and food costs, and my chronic illness worsened. On top of that, with that kind of attitude, there's no choice but to part ways.
What do you mean life is tough? You were working, weren't you?
I've been telling you since we got married that I send everything to my parents, right? Every month I showed you my pay stub and then sent money to my parents, didn't I?
I never asked about that and I never saw it. Besides, $50 should be enough.
Sure, that might have worked for you back in your student days, but now there's the two of us, you know? Didn't you realize $50 is tough for us? From here, I started throwing the words I had been holding back at my husband. You used to say the menu was always the same, but remember how I researched and cooked various recipes to save money? I wasn't even eating properly. And what do you think about the cost of consumables like toilet paper and shampoo? You used to say you wanted things to be neater, but did you know I cut my own hair instead of going to the salon? You really don't know anything about my struggles, do you? For the first time, I was able to assert myself against my husband. Surprised by my newfound attitude, he gradually became hesitant and his words started to falter. Finally, he muttered softly.
When I go home, I miss you.
I asked firmly, did you say something? But he fell silent and just left. My aunt and uncle, who had been watching the whole thing with nervous faces, smiled as soon as my husband left.
Amanda, you really gave it to him. He looked half pale, wondering if he realized how strange he was acting. Isn't it a bit late for that now?
She laughed and patted my shoulder. Seeing my aunt and uncle so happy, I couldn't help but relax and laugh along. I confronted my husband with all my pent-up emotions. Long time no see. The divorce has finally been finalized. Initially, my husband didn't admit his faults, but the lawyer pointed out politely.
What you've been doing is far from common sense.
And he had no choice but to acknowledge it. My mother said,
Even though we took in a child like you with an illness, what a waste you've turned out to be,
she said, but I didn't flinch. With my uncle in tow, my aunt came to my parents' house.
How much hardship do you think Amanda has gone through? Instead of considering her, all you do is worry about money. You're an unfit parent if you can't help your daughter when she's in a pinch, let alone push her into a corner. Take this opportunity to stop relying on your daughter. If anything happens, we won't forgive you, she told them. Reluctantly but surely, my parents came to terms with the situation and decided to repay the debt themselves. I am eternally grateful to the lawyer and my aunt and uncle for their unwavering support. Aunt Amanda, you're an absolute legend. I'm head over heels for you. My mother was a difficult woman to deal with, but my aunt is a true pillar of strength. That said, I'm glad I was able to get divorced. I successfully divorced and became free at last. With my parents' debt issues settled, along with my own debts and the compensation received from my ex-husband, I was able to repay everything. I found myself in a new place with supportive friends, enjoying fulfilling days. 1 year after the divorce, I received a message from my ex-husband. There were DMs from an unfamiliar account on my social media. The profile picture looked familiar. It was a message from my ex-husband whom I had cut off contact with. Hey, how are you? That new hairstyle suits you. I heard you went to Disneyland with friends recently. We used to go there a lot when we were together.
These were the messages written. Why is he contacting me now after all this time? Of course I ignored and blocked him. Then a few days later a message came from another account.
I want to call you. Can you give me your new cell phone number? I miss hearing your voice after such a long time.
Messages like these came. Even though I block him every time, he keeps creating new accounts and sending messages persistently. And then in one of the messages,
I have hidden photos of you in your underwear.
That kind of message came. I was momentarily shocked, but I decided to stay calm. There's a high possibility he's lying to get my attention, but I can't deny he might have malicious intent. Immediately I consulted with my lawyer. I had screenshots of all the messages that were sent to me. After contacting my lawyer, the messages stopped coming immediately. It seems all the harassment was indeed from my ex-husband. The threat of contacting the police seemed to have an impact after my lawyer stepped in. My ex-husband. He's turned into a stalker, hasn't he, my ex-husband? I'm glad my lawyer handled everything. That was the last update from Amanda on the forum, and the users often worried about her. Amanda returned to the forum again 3 years later. I previously consulted everyone here about only receiving $50 for my husband. Just a brief update for everyone. Actually, I remarried last year. The person is a man I met through a new business contact at work. I thought no one would approach a divorced woman with a chronic illness, but he confessed his feelings after we became good friends. I moved out of my uncle and aunt's house, started living together with him, and then he proposed shortly afterward. Yesterday was our first wedding anniversary, and to commemorate it, I came here to share this update. Oh, is that Amanda from back then? I'm glad she's here. Congratulations on your remarriage. Welcome back, Amanda. So you've remarried. How wonderful. My current husband doesn't control me with money. I receive enough for groceries, living expenses, and even pocket money. Of course, I can go to the beauty salon and buy new clothes. Being able to do these ordinary things makes me truly happy. Since remarrying, I've found financial comfort and can enjoy stylish living. It seems the renewed Amanda is said to be getting younger year by year, admired by those around her. And here, the current situation of my ex-husband will be revealed. According to former colleagues from my previous job, my ex-husband has gained so much weight that he's unrecognizable from before. He's still single and apparently living alone in that filthy house. As for me, I've recently been excited about posting photos of the home-cooked meals I put a lot of effort into and pictures from trips with my husband on social media. My ex-husband might still be peeking at my social media somewhere, but he's probably envious without a doubt. My ex-husband is living in a garbage dump. It's karma for not cherishing you, Amanda. You must be jealous of Amanda's cooking and travels. I'm really grateful to everyone here who supported me during my toughest times. Thank you so much for reading this far. With this, I conclude my latest update. I'm so glad Amanda seems happy. Really glad. It's reassuring to see her living happily and safely above all else. I'm glad she has a good husband. I'm sure Amanda's current husband saw through what a wonderful woman she is. May you be happy forever. Amanda has truly found real happiness. Her chronic illness seems to have settled down quite a bit now. In contrast, her ex-husband, having lost his way, has completely changed physically and continues to live a lonely life. He had a miserable fate as a husband who treated his wife harshly. After enduring such harsh experiences, I hope Amanda will be happy forever.
My husband said, "You're a housewife, so act like one, or I will divorce you." I immediately submitted divorce papers, sold the house, and moved out.
As a newlywed, I found myself being treated conveniently by my husband David, and used as a servant by my mother-in-law, leading to hectic days. Eventually, I began to question the situation and decided to pursue a divorce. Quietly preparing for this, I waited for the right moment to confront my husband with divorce papers. It was then that a stranger appeared. "You all should be ashamed. Know your shame," he shouted, causing both my husband and mother-in-law to panic. What will become of this situation? I confronted my husband, who acted all high and mighty despite me being a housewife with divorce papers, and an unexpected person appeared. My husband and I got together and married within 6 months of dating, a whirlwind romance. I never dreamed it would turn into a quick divorce like this. I am 24 years old, a housewife. My husband is 25 years old, an office worker. We don't have children. My kind and proactive husband always supported and guided me. For someone like me who tends to be shy, it was comforting. Even before we got married, my husband wanted me to quit my job and become a housewife. His reason was that he wanted me to help his mother. He often said he wanted to make things easier for his frail mother. He was kind and cared deeply for his mother. But following him turned out to be a big mistake. His attitude changed shortly after we got married. After our marriage was registered, we moved to a new home. We were supposed to choose a date for the wedding ceremony and make preparations afterward. By the way, the new home was a house handed down to me by my parents. My parents moved to a 2-family house built by my sister's family and handed over the house we had lived in until now to me. Looking back, I felt uneasy about my husband's words from around this time.
I would have preferred a newly built condominium over an old house, but if they asked me to live here, I couldn't refuse.
It was as if he was saying I have no choice but to live here. Even though it's called old, it's only about 30 years old. Still, it was renovated in a modern style to make it easier for us to live in. My father even covered the cost of the renovation as a wedding gift to us. Yet my husband didn't utter a word of thanks. It already smelled like emotional abuse. He values his own mom, but doesn't care about his wife's parents. The day after we moved, we went to visit my in-laws' house, which is about a 10-minute drive from our new home. There, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law lived together. It seems my mother-in-law's husband divorced her and left several years ago. When I reported that we had finished moving, my mother-in-law said, "Thank you for coming. You're very welcome here." She said that. But it wasn't as a daughter-in-law that I was welcomed. Immediately, my mother-in-law said, "Well, why don't you start by cleaning up your sister-in-law's room?" And that's how she started treating me like a maid. My sister-in-law is in high school. I knew my husband had a younger sister with a significant age gap, but it was the first time I actually saw her when she returned from school that day. My sister-in-law seems to be someone who can't keep things organized, and apparently it's usually my mother-in-law who cleans up after her.
This must be tough on my frail mother.
My husband would say this, but my mother-in-law appeared energetic and articulate at a glance. After finishing cleaning my sister-in-law's room, I had no time to catch my breath. I immediately folded the laundry that had just been brought in and took it to the place my mother-in-law instructed. Just when I thought I could finally go home after finishing the chores,
"Since you're already here, let's have dinner together. Stephanie can handle the meal preparation,"
my husband said. I wanted to say not to decide things on your own, but at that time, I didn't really have many doubts. By the way, no one helps with shopping or meal preparation either. After a while, my sister-in-law came home, greeted briefly, and went straight to her room. It seems my sister-in-law is shy around new people. Even when the four of us had dinner together, I hardly heard anything from her. Not a daughter-in-law, but truly a convenient helper. After being treated that way from day one, Stephanie continued to work hard for her husband and mother-in-law. Where's the wedding talk? For the next day, my regular visits to my mother-in-law's began. Every morning I would go by 9 o'clock, then follow my mother-in-law's instructions to clean each room, the toilet, and the bathroom. After that, shopping and preparing lunch. After lunch, cleaning up. In the afternoon, folding laundry and taking it to the designated place. Driving my mother-in-law to and from outings, preparing dinner. Sometimes I could go home after finishing all that, but often I was asked to weed the garden or do more shopping. My mother-in-law had a lot to say about everything. "The seasoning is too strong. Are you trying to make me and my son sick? You don't know how to clean properly or fold laundry. I wonder what kind of upbringing you've had. If you have children, I'll be the one to discipline them. I can't entrust grandchildren to you." Despite muttering these complaints to my husband,
"Mom is saying these things for your own good. Be grateful. Mom has it tough too. It seems my sister is still going through her rebellious phase."
These were the defenses he provided for his mother. If I tried to argue against it,
"For a housewife who can't even do basic chores properly, you're the one at fault,"
he would counter angrily. He's the typical energy-draining husband. At first I was like, is that so? I'll do my best, feeling somewhat energized. He's seriously a messed up husband. You don't need such a husband. Since you don't have children, there would be no problem in leaving him. Divorcing and working normally would be much easier. The online community also fiercely criticized him. Even so, when he's in a good mood, he treats me kindly. So I managed to deceive myself somehow and continue our marriage. Gradually, my husband's lifestyle became more extravagant. He went out drinking with colleagues, played golf on weekends. In addition to our shared compact car, he bought an expensive new car. We were supposed to save for when we have children, but his credit card bills made it impossible. If I vented even a little,
"Don't act all high and mighty just because you're a stay-at-home wife. If you have complaints, let's just get divorced."
he casually waved around the divorce papers he has signed. And by the way, my husband is by no means a high earner. We're able to indulge because we don't have to pay rent or a mortgage. Yeah, without any gratitude towards my parents, he bragged about this extravagant indulgence to my colleagues. On days when my husband goes drinking with his colleagues, I often receive late-night come-pick-me-up calls. If I go to pick him up, his colleagues who usually join him end up getting a ride home in the car as well. His colleague always apologized with a look of regret.
Stephanie, I'm truly sorry. I intended to catch the last train home on time, but the conversation got lively and...
To the apologetic colleague, David responded,
This is just how it is, right? This person is living off my earnings. You should get married soon, too.
And thus my husband inexplicably asserted dominance. As a result, the colleague gave a wry smile and lowered his head to me. It was a familiar pattern. Your husband is so infuriating. His coworkers are completely appalled. I don't think it would be fun to have a drink with him. That's right. Sometimes he calls me out at 3 or 4 in the morning. It's quite a hassle for his colleague too, right? When my husband goes out drinking, he always contacts me after work. Sometimes he calls just when dinner is ready, so I wish he would at least tell me in the morning if he plans to go out. It's such a waste to throw away the dinner I've made with effort. I've also requested this. And then my husband...
Then why don't you eat for 2? By the way, my mom said you should build up more stamina.
And with that, he said something outrageous. Are they both trying to make me obese? I didn't say that out loud. I just silently listened, and then...
You don't understand because you have little experience as an office worker. Whether I go out for a drink or not depends on the work situation that day. Besides, if invited by the boss, you can't refuse, right? At any rate, my boss says I'm a promising star.
I was so tired of hearing his bragging about what he would do when he get promoted. The only respite I could get was around the weekends. My husband, who has Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays off, always went drinking on weekends. So I didn't have any pressure to cook dinner, and I could spend my nights relaxing alone. Well, except for the late night come-pick-me-up calls, so I couldn't drink alcohol, though. It's better for your husband not to come home at all right after we got married. What's the point of being married? You could be much more free and relaxed if you got divorced. Yeah, that's exactly right. It would be so much easier to just get divorced and work a normal job. Around 3 months after we got married, I got one more job at my in-laws' house. During this time, my younger sister was skipping school. She'd lock herself in her room, and if my mother-in-law scolded her, she'd retort angrily and cause a scene. It became my job to calm her down and listen to her. But compared to dealing with my mother-in-law and my energy-sapping husband, it was much easier. My sister-in-law wouldn't do anything, but at least she wouldn't say anything to me either. Taking care of her daily needs without any complaints was actually quite pleasant. When my sister-in-law was in her room, I felt relieved for my mother-in-law's constant demands, and I appreciated that too. Reclusive sister-in-law, good job. Is she on your side? But she's a high schooler, so she should handle her own affairs. Maybe these little respites were why I couldn't bring myself to divorce. While trying to deceive myself, I held on to a faint hope that if I tried a bit harder, my husband would finally acknowledge me. However, I finally began to question my own situation. It was someone close to me who made me realize that this wasn't normal. On my first Mother's Day after marriage, I bought a bouquet for my mother and went to my sister and brother-in-law's home. My parents and my sister and brother-in-law were delighted to see me. When asked why my husband wasn't with me, I casually brushed it off, saying it was due to work commitments. The scene at my sister and brother-in-law's home was shocking to me at the time. Maybe because I had started living alone when I entered a university, I had forgotten what family warmth was like. The warmth of being with family again after a long time was touching. My brother-in-law cherished both my sister and my parents dearly. Their banter with my father and mother was just like that of a real parent and child. My sister is pregnant, so it seems my brother-in-law is considerate in various ways. When her morning sickness is severe, he apparently helps with the housework. Ah, so this is what family is. For a moment I wondered if my husband would change once we had children, but my thoughts quickly changed. A child with a father and grandmother like that would be too pitiful. Thanks to that experience, I finally felt liberated. At the same time, a strong resentment towards my husband surged within me. All right, let's get a divorce. I'll discard that kind of husband from my life. From that day on, I steadily progressed with preparations for divorce. When I explained the situation to my parents and sister's family,
Yeah, you'll have a divorce on your record, but it's much better than enduring and living like this.
They understood so easily. Of course, in front of my husband and mother-in-law, I played the role of the convenient daughter-in-law. I've been waiting for this. Lightning strikes the lousy husband. And the forum users were excited. I gradually organized my belongings, checked documents, and once I was reasonably prepared, I took action promptly. By this time, my husband had significantly reduced the number of times he went drinking compared to before. That day, I expected him to come straight home. However, I didn't prepare dinner. I was relaxing and eating out by myself. As expected, my husband hadn't gone out drinking. When I came back, he approached me in a full-on bad mood and said,
"What do you think you're doing? I had just come home after a long day at work."
This was just as planned, and he flew into a rage.
"Do you know what time it is now?"
"It's 9 p.m.
"I called you several times. Why didn't you answer? Who were you hanging out with at this hour?"
"I was having dinner alone."
"You're a genius at ticking me off, aren't you?"
"Yeah?"
"Huh? Yeah, my ass. I've been starving here waiting. Hurry up and make dinner."
I thought for sure it was a drinking party. There wasn't one today either. When I played dumb, my husband's face reddened even more and he started yelling loudly. But thanks to that, I could move on to the next plan. Anyway, I've already recorded this entire exchange on a voice recorder. Numerous words insulting and denigrating my character. I've kept them securely as evidence. Just this alone would suffice as grounds for divorce, but I still had more to do. Yes, it was time for revenge against my mother-in-law. We did it! Go all out! And the enthusiastic forum members cheered. The next day, as usual, I went to see my mother-in-law and recounted the exchange with my husband from the previous night. Upon hearing it, mother-in-law said, "Using abusive language and shouting is not right, but you're the one who's in the wrong for provoking it." She was still defending her beloved son. Thanks to that, I got a chance to blow up at her. So am I the bad one for doing things that lead to being shouted at? According to your reasoning, that's how it is, right? What do you mean by reasoning? That's what my mother-in-law asked. That's why my sister-in-law acts out. It's your fault for raising her the wrong way. Oh, you! How dare you! It's because of the way you raised her that she acts out, right? Please, stop this! Well, what else am I supposed to say? I'm just following her example, okay? That's when I went on a rampage. I messed up the room just like my sister-in-law did. My mother-in-law was all flustered, saying things like, "Oh no!" and "What's happening?" My sister-in-law showed up in the middle looking stunned. "Hey, stop just standing there! Do something about her!" Ignoring what my mother-in-law said, my sister-in-law went back to her room. I returned home, leaving my mother-in-law bewildered, and after a while, my husband came back. Apparently, he had received a call from my mother-in-law and left work early. As expected, my husband looked furious. I positioned myself near the back door to ensure I could escape any time. "Welcome back. Did you leave work early? Are you feeling unwell?"
"Don't play dumb. You know why I am angry, right?"
My husband trembled in anger.
"You. What a terrible thing to do. Someone who can't respect their spouse's parents is unfit to be a wife."
"But isn't it your mother who's being cruel?"
"What did you say?" "That's it. Enough. Oppose me and it's divorce."
Inside, I shouted, "Yes!" This line, this moment, I've been waiting for it.
"Apologize to my mother right now. Get down on your knees. Otherwise, I'll really divorce you."
I handed over the paper to my yelling husband that I had prepared. "Oh, fine. Here's the divorce papers. All that's left is your mother's signature. Once I get that, I'll submit them to the court." These were the divorce papers my husband had been dangling as a threat for a while. I had already signed them and got my parents to sign too.
"Wait a minute,"
I quickly retorted to my suddenly flustered husband. "Why? Isn't this what you wanted?"
"That's not what anyone said. I mean, you're in trouble, right? You don't have a job in hand. How are you going to make a living without me?"
Facing my unexpected counterattack, my husband started to fumble nervously. But his attempts to assert dominance with his "I'm the man" attitude were laughable. As I watched his comical display with a cool gaze, my mother-in-law barged into her home.
"Mom, please listen to me."
Interrupting my husband as he sought help, I stepped forward in front of my mother-in-law. "Mom, perfect timing. Could you sign this?" As I said this, handing over the divorce papers, a stranger walked into the living room.
"Huh? Dad?"
My husband exclaimed. The man in the well-tailored suit was my husband's father and my mother-in-law's ex-husband. With a triumphant look, my mother-in-law turned to her ex-husband and he said, "So this is that infamous, disgraceful woman. After causing such a ruckus in our home, now she's starting a divorce scandal? Who does she think she is, anyway? You should say something to her, too." At that moment, my father-in-law said,
Nice to meet you. I'm her son's father.
And he nodded to me. I returned the gesture with a slight nod. I thought the old hag brought in reinforcements, but it wasn't that.
Today I have come to apologize for all the rudeness of my son and wife,
my husband's father said. Hey, you! That's not what we agreed on! She was panicking next to me, but she was silenced quickly.
Quiet.
But...
Stephanie, I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused you. It's truly inexcusable.
Saying this, he lowered his head deeply this time. When I listened to the story again, I heard that my father-in-law rushed over after receiving a call from my sister-in-law. During occasional phone calls when he was worried about his daughter skipping school, it seems my situation came up as well. This time he interrupted his work to come here because... This is bad. My sister-in-law is losing it. This was the urgent request made by my sister-in-law.
I've been worried since I heard my daughter's story. Even though we're divorced, I still bear responsibility for neglecting my wife and kids.
So, taking responsibility himself, my father-in-law said this and signed as a witness on the divorce papers. And even now there's no sign of remorse from the two of them.
You guys should apologize to Stephanie too,
he shouted angrily. However, my husband was not a man of his word, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he started making excuses.
I don't remember doing anything to deserve a divorce. Sure, I asked Mom for help, but it was all for Stephanie's sake. Stephanie wants to be seen as a thoughtful wife too, right? But Mom says things like, and don't let her boss you around. Anyway, why should I apologize? I give her living expenses and let her stay home. Isn't that enough?
And that's when I couldn't help but shout. Shut up! I'm not a housewife because I want to be. Didn't you say I haven't done anything to deserve divorce? Well, what about this? And then seizing the moment, I played back a voice recorder packed with evidence. I also played the recordings of my mother-in-law's bullying behavior towards me. Immediately, my husband and mother-in-law started to panic. My father-in-law's expression turned into a furious scowl in an instant.
You two, how dare you treat someone else's precious daughter like this? Shame on you.
His angry voice echoed through the room. My husband and mother-in-law mumbled apologies, clearly flustered. Unexpected reinforcements arrived, and your pent-up frustration cleared in an instant. Father-in-law, you're awesome. I'm glad your husband's father is a decent person. Your relationship with your sister-in-law had been tenuous, but she seemed like an ally now. That's what the online community said. My husband's father grabbed my husband and my mother-in-law's heads and lowered them to apologize to me. With no room left for excuses, my husband had no choice but to agree to the divorce. After thanking my father-in-law, I immediately went to the city hall and submitted the divorce papers. I also started the procedure to sell the house we currently live in. It's a house we renovated with the consent of both parents. When we discussed divorce, we agreed as a family to sell it. Afterward, I wanted to thank my sister-in-law, so I went to my mother-in-law's house one last time. Thank you. You really helped me. But I'm sorry I imitated you, sister-in-law. I apologized like that, and she responded, It can't be helped with that, Mom. I think you held on for almost a year. And my sister-in-law showed an unusual smile. Not long after that, the divorce papers were accepted, and I was finally single. I was finally freed from those two devils. Congrats on your divorce, you did it. Your sister-in-law must have had a tough time too. Actually, she might be the most level-headed one of all. That's good. I'm sure you'll find someone better next time. And so the online community cheered me on. I was so happy to finally be single, but the two people who had dumped me were still clinging on. It was so annoying. I was staying with my sister and her husband for the time being. I started looking for a job right away, but those two devils were even more persistent than I thought, and my ex-husband kept sending me, "You were the only one for me" emails. My ex-mother-in-law kept sending me "I need you" emails. Feeling annoyed, I blocked her emails. Surprisingly, my ex-mother-in-law then came over uninvited to my parents' place. I wasn't home at the time, but according to my mother, my ex-mother-in-law appeared to show no signs of remorse whatsoever. Filing for divorce without my son's consent is just too much. And selling off the house without permission? Certainly we're not blameless either, but I've apologized profusely. My son is mentally distressed. I'm tempted to demand compensation. That was from my ex-mother-in-law. At first my mother seemed surprised, but then she laughed in disbelief. However, to avoid further intrusions,
I don't think she'll back down quietly. Call me immediately if anything happens,
my father-in-law had said, giving me his phone number, and I reported the situation to him. As a result, it seems my ex-mother-in-law received a severe scolding from her own ex-husband. Consequently, both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law are prohibited from approaching me. My ex-husband has to pay compensation to me. The allowance my ex-father-in-law was providing to my ex-mother-in-law has been significantly reduced. These 3 directives were imposed by my ex-father-in-law. Interestingly, it appears my ex-father-in-law grew tired of my ex-mother-in-law's arrogance and decided to divorce her. After much nagging, my ex-mother-in-law finally agreed to a settlement where she would receive alimony for my sister-in-law and a significant amount of spousal support. Of course, for my ex-father-in-law, a company executive, this was a much easier arrangement than continuing the marriage. As a result of this agreement, my ex-father-in-law took custody of my sister-in-law. I heard that my sister-in-law later transferred to a distance learning high school. My ex-husband returned to his mother's house. If the 2 of them don't obey my ex-father-in-law's orders,
I'll completely cut off their living expenses,
he said, threatening them with that. Also, I heard a funny story from my ex-husband's colleague, whom I coincidentally met during job hunting. Apparently, my ex-husband became the laughingstock at his company. He's the pitiful man who got left by his wife. It seems my ex-husband changes his attitude depending on the person at work. He was boasting to his colleagues and subordinates. The decrease in the number of drinking parties probably made everyone drift away from him because of that. So with his great pride, my ex-husband found it uncomfortable at work and resigned voluntarily. Now he doesn't even have a job, but has to pay me compensation. My ex-mother-in-law also can't live luxuriously due to the reduction in living expenses for my ex-father-in-law. She seems to lead a modest life. Thanks to that, there are various rumors circulating in the neighborhood, and now I've secured a job, so I feel relieved. I'm also looking for an apartment and will move soon. Since my ex-husband's colleague works in real estate, I trusted him to find a suitable place, and he found a place that meets my requirements. When I coincidentally met him in town, we had a lively conversation which led to discussions about job hunting and apartment searching. I don't want to think about marriage for a while, but somehow I'm maintaining a good relationship with him. Colleague, marriage didn't work out, but Stephanie is blessed with good people around her. That's great. I wish you happiness. And so the online community were relieved too. That's the end of my story. Thank you for reading until the end. This time, Stephanie's decision to divorce led to unexpected helpers appearing, resulting in her husband and mother-in-law receiving ample punishment. Furthermore, her husband's inappropriate behavior outside led to him becoming a laughingstock within the company, further damaging his reputation. Stephanie's decisive actions surely brought relief to various people associated with her husband and mother-in-law.
My fiancé cheats one day before our wedding, justifying it. We're not married yet, so it's okay. The next day, his betrayal is exposed.
On the day before our wedding, I discovered my fiancé's infidelity and it hit me hard. When I confronted him about the affair, he actually had the audacity to say that since we weren't married yet, he didn't think it counted as cheating in any serious way. Considering our guests, we went ahead with the ceremony, but my fiancé's cheating became a major obstacle, leading us to halt proceedings. Later, my fiancé disappeared, but I managed to track him down with the help of some people, and what unfolded was beyond anything I could have imagined. What on earth happened? The day before the wedding, my fiancé Paul's infidelity was exposed. I was surprised that something like this could actually happen, and I never imagined it would happen to me. We were promising each other a future and getting married, so I never even considered the possibility of him cheating. Were there any signs before this happened? People like that sometimes cheat even before they propose. There were no signs in particular. Paul and I met at a matchmaking party where he approached me and I thought our conditions and personalities matched, so we decided to start dating. At that time, I was in my late 20s, and because all my high school friends were already married, I felt a bit rushed. We scheduled our dates on specific days, deciding the time and place via WhatsApp before meeting there. If he was cheating, it would be difficult to notice on days we didn't meet. After dating for over a year, Paul proposed to me. I was very happy, but as the wedding approached, I started worrying if I could really be a good wife. Maybe I was putting too much pressure on myself to protect my future with Paul. So even on the day before the wedding ceremony, I couldn't calm down and wanted to see Paul's face. I thought about video calling him, but Paul didn't answer his phone easily, so I headed to the nearest station where he lived. There I found Paul in the midst of an affair. They were walking arm in arm, clearly cheating. I followed them and took many photos as evidence. There was enough evidence that he couldn't deny his infidelity. At that moment, I thought even if I confronted them both, it would be 2 against 1, so I waited for them to separate. Late at night, after Paul and his affair partner parted ways, I confronted Paul. "Hey, who's that woman just now?" When I asked, Paul was briefly surprised, but then wore a deeply annoyed expression, and I realized, so this is who he really is. "This is cheating, you know. I can't marry you like this."
What are you talking about? We're not married yet, so it's fine, right? Once we're married, I won't cheat. This is fine. Besides, I'm properly separated from Beth now.
I was dismayed to hear that. Beth, by the way, is the name of the cheating partner. There's no excuse for that, right?
That's why stubborn women are no good.
When he said that, I was already at my wit's end. No, at this point, the wedding should be called off. It's pitiful for the guests who will celebrate without knowing anything about a couple about to split up. I really wanted to dump Paul at this point. The day before the wedding, guests have already been staying at the hotel where the wedding will take place, having traveled from far away. On the day of the ceremony, I discovered that Paul had cheated on me. I started to wonder if it might be best to cancel the ceremony, but for now, we'll still have the ceremony tomorrow as originally planned. We'll discuss properly whether to break off the engagement afterwards. If we do, we'll return the gifts to the guests. When I said that, Paul didn't seem to agree and started to complain.
Why did it have to come to this? This is absurd.
I ignored that and went home. But I couldn't sleep at all, and in the morning, exhausted, I headed to the venue. Somehow I managed to hide it with that makeup and put on a smile, but my parents noticed and asked if I was nervous. Yeah, I was really worried if we could make it through smoothly until the end. I said that and tried to hide Paul's affair, but my 2 lifelong friends who have known me for 20 years saw through it. They noticed something was wrong and immediately asked, "What's wrong?" Even though I made excuses like I told my mother, they didn't believe me at all. Looking into their eyes, I was convinced that I couldn't hide anything from these 2. Reluctantly, I told them about the previous day's events. Then they got really angry and even scolded me. "Why are you trying to go ahead with the wedding as if nothing happened?" And so the 2 friends ran all the way to where both families' parents and relatives had gathered, and they told everything. The initiative of those 2 best friends is amazing. I think it would have been better to tell everything from the beginning. At that time, Paul's mother was absent from her seat, and Paul's father and all the relatives turned pale as they listened to the story. Then Paul's father immediately brought Paul over, and both of them knelt down and apologized in front of me. As for my parents, my father kept blaming Paul with harsh words, while my mother hugged me and cried. I regretted not speaking up sooner after all.
I don't intend to blame you, Nancy, but I do wish you had told us sooner.
When Paul's father said that to me, I reflected on it and apologized to everyone. However, for those who came from afar, having already been here since the day before, it was difficult to suddenly bring up canceling the engagement. While explaining this, I started crying, but Paul still seemed unable to understand.
We're not married yet, so it shouldn't matter. If you want to make a fuss about cheating, she should wait until we're married to complain. Well, it's not a problem for us since I broke up before getting married.
With statements like these, my father's anger intensified. Relatives from the groom's side also criticized Paul with expressions of disbelief. Then Paul's father said,
"The moment you get engaged and visit each other's families, it becomes a major issue involving compensation. You don't understand the seriousness of the situation."
He lectured loudly, and Paul seemed to freeze in response. For a moment, the scene fell silent, but then Paul's mother hurried over. "Don't gang up on Paul like that, all of you. Isn't Paul pitiful?" While saying this, Paul's mother began to pat Paul's head sympathetically while he remained kneeling on the floor. "It's terrible to gang up on him like this, isn't it?"
"Yeah, I haven't done anything wrong yet. Everyone blames me."
"Is that so? I'll straighten out those kinds of people myself." As they had this conversation, Paul's father sighed deeply.
"Take your mother outside. This isn't going anywhere."
Upon saying that, several male relatives from the groom's side took Paul's mother outside of the venue. Paul's father acted as a coordinator among the relatives, the voice of authority. Having lost his ally, Paul reverted to a precarious situation.
"Anyway, everyone's going to blame me, right? I messed up. I should just take the blame for everything,"
he said, making a half-hearted apology. Still, everyone was furious about it. Because of a mother like that, he's grown up without knowing right from wrong. I never realized Paul's true nature would come to this. I thought he was a bit selfish, but I think men have a lower mental age than women, so I thought it was something like that. I didn't see such a pathetic side of him when we were dating. The reception was then cancelled and the congratulatory gifts were returned to all the guests. We broke up the event with a light dinner because it was a waste of food that had been prepared. In the end, Paul...
I've been actively looking for a spouse, so it's not weird to be seeing two women at the same time, right? Plus, I broke up with Beth properly yesterday, so there's no problem with that,
he said without showing any sign of acknowledging his own fault. I told Paul this. It's not a problem to date multiple people when looking for a spouse, but since you proposed to me, it was clear that I was the one you chose for marriage, right? If you're engaged, continuing a relationship with someone else is betrayal, so breaking off the engagement is only natural.
But I'm still single, right? Cheating while dating doesn't lead to damages or anything, right?
It's different if you're engaged. Anyway, be prepared for a damages claim. When I said that, Paul glared at me intensely and stormed out of the venue. Why did Paul propose to you if he's with another woman? Doesn't Paul understand that marriage is based on law? After that, I decided to consult a lawyer to break off the engagement. There's evidence, and my friend recorded Paul's outbursts at the venue, so things progressed smoothly. The biggest issue was that we didn't know who Beth was, but when I looked at Paul's social media, I found pictures of him connected to Beth. We had detectives look into it and obtained personal information safely. The lawyer contacted us about the affair, but Beth said she didn't know Paul had a fiancée, so we arranged to meet. Originally, I planned for Paul to join us, but we couldn't reach him, and apparently he's been absent from work without permission. When I asked Paul's father, he told me that unexpectedly, not only Paul, but also his mother were missing, and they were searching for them. Reluctantly, Beth and I decided to discuss the matter at a cafe together. Beth is in her early 20s and is a quiet type of woman. She is 3 years older than me. I didn't know he was engaged, but I'm sorry nonetheless. She immediately apologized and showed me WhatsApp messages that proved she didn't know. It's been a year since we met. Don't you think it's about time we consider marriage or something? Haven't you thought about it at all? To which Paul responded coldly.
Why don't you think about it when we have a child?
He responded with this cold reply. That day's exchange occurred when Paul and I were already engaged, so maybe that's why he has such an attitude. When I saw this, I thought we should break up. But I was also anxious about rushing into marriage and losing him. Then one day he suddenly asked me to make today's date the last. She said that and showed me the WhatsApp from their last date, which was the day before the wedding. Immediately after the breakup,
Goodbye.
I confirmed that only one message had been sent. Beth's story didn't seem like a lie, and more importantly, Beth seemed furious with Paul. He turned out to be such a guy. Breaking up was the right choice. I'm glad you didn't marry him and just lived together. You're still in your 20s, so let's choose a better man. She even said that to me, and I nodded to Beth. Beth, I am sorry for calling you out on your affair, even though you are the victim. No, I'm the one who should apologize. We had a peaceful exchange and parted ways. Beth was a good person, and I'm glad. Some people seem to think cheating is justifiable, so from now on, don't go alone. Yeah, it was only good because Beth was a good person that things turned out well. Looking back now, I realize I might have been a bit arrogant. And then a month later, Paul suddenly visited my house. By the way, I've been living alone in an apartment since I started working. I talked to him with a chain lock on, but for some reason, Paul spoke down to me.
Beth and I have completely broken up, so I'll marry you.
He said that, so I ignored it and just conveyed my own demands. You've been missing all this time? More importantly, tell me where you are now.
I won't tell you until you sign the marriage certificate. I'll come again, so write down the necessary items in the entry fields and sign it properly.
With that, Paul left behind a marriage certificate with only his section filled out, and a sample of how to fill it out. Of course, I tore it up and threw it away immediately. What did he come here for? Such a nuisance. There's no way I'm marrying someone who was cheating. That week later, Paul came to my apartment as he had promised, so I talked with him through the chain lock on again. Personally, I wanted to pinpoint Paul's whereabouts and hoped he'd slip up, but it didn't go well. Paul only talked about marrying me.
Did you sign the marriage certificate?
No, of course not. We broke off the engagement, remember?
No, I'm done with Beth, and I promise I'll never cheat again.
Ah, yes. Then put it into practice when you marry someone else.
I don't want that. I'll be in trouble if you don't marry me.
What trouble would that be?
Well, you see, right now I'm living with my mom and she's always complaining about everything, so it's tough. If we get married, you will prepare a new home for us, right? And I want you to take care of my mother while you're at it.
He said that, so I was not only angry but also amazed. Oh, I see. That must be tough.
Don't you feel sorry for me? So marry me.
I'll think about it.
Okay, I'll come back in a week, so I'm expecting a good answer.
With that, Paul left, but when I looked out the window, I could see him walking home. I thought I could tail him, so I decided to follow Paul. Paul boarded a train and got off at a station several stops away, then continued on foot. Seeing him enter a dilapidated apartment building that looked quite old, I made a phone call to someone. 30 minutes later, that person seemed to have come all the way here in a van, parking in a nearby parking lot, and I was surprised by the number of people who came. So many came? You mean the number of people who fit in a van? The person I called was Paul's father, but for some reason, there were 6 relatives from Paul's side, and I was surprised. Huh? What's going on, everyone?
You'll understand when you go. For now, let's head to the apartment where Paul went in.
Upon my father-in-law's suggestion, I rang the intercom of the apartment, and Paul's mother came out. Since we barged in with 8 people, Paul's mother turned pale and started making a scene. Why did you find out about this place? Is it fair to come in such a large group like this? Do you want to blame us that badly? You all have the worst personalities. However, it wasn't Paul's father who responded to this. Representing the relatives, Paul's mother's sister, Catherine, spoke harshly to Paul's mother.
What are you thinking? It was Paul who had the affair, right? Isn't it a parent's job to make them take responsibility? Hiding here like this, who's the coward?
It's Nancy's fault for being cheated on. Paul was put in an environment where he could cheat because of this woman. It's Nancy's fault for not taking care of her man properly. Paul's mother was saying such things, but that's when Paul's father argued back.
You're the kind of woman who's raised Paul to be the kind of man who cheats. Instead of blaming Nancy, you should be disciplining Paul.
You've always been like this, such a rigid and boring man. You're the one who's been cruel, demanding he take responsibility and pay alimony. As a father, you should be protecting your child. Paul's mother continued her rant, while Paul's father and the relatives around them sighed and some muttered, "She's unfit as a mother." Then Paul's father took an envelope out of his bag and thrust it towards Paul's mother, saying,
As a parent, I should correct my child's mistakes. But how can I correct you who are the mother and are in the wrong? I know you were cheating until last year. I'll sue you and that man for compensation, he said in a stern tone. Inside the envelope were photos showing Paul's mother and a young man in his 20s cheating. Actually, Paul's father noticed Paul's mother's affair last year and asked a detective for an affair investigation. Evidence was also collected and he thought about divorcing her, but he reconsidered. At that time, Paul said to his parents, Everyone around me is getting married and I want to get married soon. I want to register in a year. It seems he started actively participating in marriage consultation agencies and marriage hunting parties. Paul's father decided to hold off on the divorce, thinking that if his parents were not on good terms during the wedding, it would put a damper on the whole ceremony. On the day I came to greet you about the wedding, Paul's father secretly, If you two get married, we plan to divorce. Even so, will you still marry our son? When he asked me that, I answered that it's okay, but actually I had already heard about this from Paul. It seems that Paul's father told Paul about the divorce plan without saying anything to Paul's mother. When I heard about this during the proposal, I agreed to it, knowing full well. Paul's mother heard about the divorce plan from Paul, so that's probably why she ran away with Paul. No way I was surprised that Paul's mother was also cheating. At that time, Paul came out to protect his mother and said, It's worse to be unfaithful. If you were truly loved, you wouldn't think about cheating. I got tired of you complaining only about your anxiety and delaying my breakup with Beth. What? But it's natural to have pre-marriage jitters, right? Is it really natural? I hated it. But I thought you would value family once we got married, so didn't I break up with Beth before the ceremony? There's no need to make such a big deal out of it. He kept making selfish remarks, and of course, all the gathered relatives were disgusted. I'm not saying something wrong, right? I broke up before getting married, right? Why do I have to be blamed? Even celebrities do it, right? Paul and Paul's mother were trying to justify their affair, but well, there's no way that would fly. If you don't think cheating is bad, you can just think that way on your own, can't you? I wanted to know your whereabouts.
Your opinion doesn't matter to me. Anyway, I know your address, so I'll send you a registered letter from a lawyer later, I said, and Paul's father nodded in agreement.
I'll also send a registered letter like you, Nancy. Then I'll also make the other man pay for compensation.
Paul and Paul's mother seemed to realize that it was pointless to insist that they weren't at fault, and they stood there dumbfounded with pale faces.
Nancy, shall we go back to the car first? I'll take you home.
When Paul's father said that, I gratefully agreed. But since none of the relatives came with us, I was surprised when I turned around to see 6 relatives confronting Paul's mother. What's going on with everyone?
Everyone came here together to get money back from Paul's mom.
Huh? Paul's father explained to me, who was surprised. Apparently, Paul's mother's affair partner was a young man in his 20s, and she had been spending quite a lot on him. When the money ran out, she lied to the relatives that Paul's father had become unemployed, borrowing money from them. As soon as they realized it was a lie, all the lenders demanded repayment in one go.
I didn't say anything at the wedding because it was a special occasion, but please return the money you borrowed from us.
I heard voices saying that and thought it's Paul's mother's own fault. An affair with a man in his 20s? How old is Paul's mother anyway? Considering Paul is around his 30s, right? Even if she gave birth in her early 20s, is she being in her 50s? Disgusting. At my workplace, a part-time woman in her 50s is dating a young male colleague, so it's not unheard of. After that, Paul's mother did not have enough money to pay them back, so Paul paid only what he could get out of his savings, but it was not enough at all. Before the wedding, it seems there was no problem returning the money to relatives, but in addition to returning the gifts, all the wedding expenses were borne by Paul's family. The after-party venue was also cancelled, but with a 100% cancellation fee, Paul is expected to pay the full amount. Moreover, Paul has been absent from work without permission, seemingly to avoid me and Paul's father. It seems he returned to work at the workplace, desperately clinging to a straw, but he was naturally dismissed. In the end, relatives of Paul who run the company ended up hiring Paul and his mother to live and work on site. It's quite hard labor. Paul works every day while crying, and Paul's mother, who had been a housewife for many years, is exhausted every day from unfamiliar work. Paul's parents are divorced with no property division, and the low salary minus the money to repay relatives is the take-home pay. It seems that they couldn't come up with compensation money for me and Paul's father, so they apparently borrowed money from somewhere else. Because of that repayment, it seemed that they are left with just the bare minimum for living expenses. Still, it seems they are living together in a small single-room dormitory, and all they need are utilities, food expenses, and other necessary costs. Catherine told me that there's no problem as long as they live without extravagance. By the way, this is what I heard from Paul's father. Paul's mother's affair partner turned out to be a married man, of all things. It seemed they didn't expect to be sued for compensation a year after breaking up, and that issue led to a big fight and eventual divorce for that couple. I heard that from now on, the affair partner's wife is preparing to claim compensation from Paul's mother as well. It's all over now for Paul's mother. If they become minimalists, there won't be any problems, right? As for me, I'm living a life that hasn't changed from before marriage. The only change is that I no longer have weekly dates. Nowadays, I don't think marriage is everything, and I find fulfillment in my work. Honestly, I have been thinking that I needed to get married, but now I'm wondering what will happen to my career in the future. That's one of the reasons I got cold feet. If I can focus solely on my career, then I'll just dive into work without hesitation. And even though the engagement was broken off, I don't think it's something to be sad about. I'm also enjoying my hobbies on my days off, and I'm living a fulfilling life. After the engagement was called off, I went out to eat with my 2 best friends, and they not only treated me, but also comforted me. They're both the type who aren't interested in marriage, and we're even talking about getting a roommate together. It seems like marriage is getting even further away, but for now, I'm imagining a happy future. You never know what will happen tomorrow in life, so I want to try things that I've always wanted to do. I hope the happy days will continue from now on. Thank you for listening to me so far. You're right, marriage isn't everything. What matters is how you want to live your life. I hope my friends and I can continue to live harmoniously together. And so, Nancy, who had been under the mistaken impression that it was okay to cheat as long as they weren't married yet, broke off the engagement and even received alimony. She would likely focus on her career and continue to live happily with her best friends. Once you're married, getting a divorce becomes much more complicated. It was fortunate for Nancy that she was able to break off the engagement before things got too messy. Nancy will no longer be in a hurry to get married.